I'm going to Moscow.
When I hear back from him?
Я думал, все закончилось.
Not for Vadim.
Do you understand? In Moscow, they kill you! Do you understand?
They will kill me here, too. I don't want Mama or Katya to get hurt.
Introduce us to the concept of the show for people who won't have read the book, who won't be familiar.
The show is about how the mafia, we've had this long tradition of mafia shows in your country, brilliant mafia shows, but they've often been about the death of the mafia in many ways, like The Sopranos. This is really showing how the mafia is very much alive and has transmuted and transformed into this kind of many-headed hydra around the world, this global transnational crime that's sort of invisible and is hiding under a veneer of legitimacy, a sort of white-collar, the accountants and the moving of the money and parking money in different ways and how it's complicit with governments and crime agencies and things like that. So it's sort of like about the new mafia, really.
And Alex's path through this show is really fascinating. It kind of reminded me a lot of Walter White in that he ultimately starts from a pretty good place, and the dividing line between what's right and what's wrong gets very blurry, doesn't it?
It does. That was kind of the joy, I think, for me as an actor, and I think James, who is a brilliant actor's director and loves character and sort of story. We really sort of enjoyed picking out his journey and his arc, and we didn't shoot it chronologically at all. We shot it in 150 days, just one big block. So it was a real challenge to map that arc. But yeah, it's quite a sort of Michael Corleone type story. He starts the golden boy of ethical finance in London and ends, without giving it away, but you can probably tell he goes to the dark side, and really takes us as an audience through that tour of the what is the globalized truth of the mafia, as James explained. So yeah, it was a really exciting arc to map, and a challenging one for sure.
But it was based on a book by Misha Glenny about when the fall of the Soviet Union and how they kind of franchised, the Russian mafia groups franchised out around the world. And what's very interesting in how close it is now that the word in the UK, the show has been very close to home in the UK, and they're talking about a new McMafia law in terms of seizing illicit assets in the UK and going after some of these criminals that are sort of hiding and parking money in housing in UK and offshore, like the Paradise Papers and the Panama Papers. All the time while we were shooting, the sort of resonances that Hussein Amini, my co-creator, and I had come up with and looked at, all these things were coming true. And we look now, if we look at elements of collusion and all the stuff that's potentially being looked at in your country, it's really close to home.
I think we should introduce the world to Semyon, or introduce the room, not the world, that's a bit grand, to Semyon Kleiman, who you play. He's so warm at times and so complex as a character. How much of that was part of the initial appeal to you?
A lot. I think he treads this fine line between being a seemingly very compassionate man, but his motivations are obviously mercenary and for his own ends. I mean, he is a financier. He has a certain legitimacy in the Israeli government, but he also has, for many years, tread in the in illegal movement of goods and services. But when it comes particularly to Alex's character, I felt that that Semyon, one of his seductive devices, or his way of making his way in the world, especially with Alex, was to express, and not insincerely, compassion, because there is a lot, as that expression, there is honesty among thieves.